Hello, everybody. I was at Fantasia Film Festival in Montreal, Canada, and I saw some anime movies that I feel like people would be interested in hearing my opinions on. This is not the format that I would like to be doing this in, but I've been struggling to find the discipline and the time to write a script and edit a normal video. So because life is busy, but I still want to do YouTube, we're going to do it like this because I feel like it'll just be easier for me to record quickly and put it out there quickly, which means more uploads even if they're not to the standard that I would necessarily want them to be. Hopefully in the future you can get more cool scripted content, but for now this is okay. Thank you. Yeah, so it's been a long time since Fantasia and these opinions are not as fresh as they could be, but we're just going to jump into it regardless. Let's start with Sandland. This movie did not meet my expectations. I'm really disappointed in what I saw, which is crazy because there are so many names attached to this and there are so many reasons for it to be good. It's based off of an Akira Toriyama manga that was one volume long in the 2000s, so making a movie on it, makes a lot of sense because it was only one volume. Then it's coming out of Kamikaze Doga's studio, which is popular for their 3D animation. And then it's directed by Toshihisa Yokoshima, who did a movie called Co-Colors, which was another 3D animated movie, also from Kamikaze Doga. Very artful, very stylish. Have not seen it, but I've seen clips, and I know that, it's good, and it's got good reviews. And it's also got a soundtrack from Yugo Kanno and an opening theme from the guy who does the soundtrack for Megalobox, who I really like. Yeah, I'm familiar with all these names, so I have every reason to be excited for it, but it just really didn't deliver. And this movie is not putting that much on its plate. It really doesn't have any excuse fumbling the bag like this. It's just these three characters in a tank on a mission to get the water for their Mad Max-esque society. Two of the characters are like Dragon Quest monsters. I like the design of the main guy a lot. And the old guy, he's cute. And the other old guy, who is a human, is also cool. He's like a grizzled old man. And they have like a fun dynamic. They're a really fun trio to kind of watch, cut from different cloth, but they grow onto each other in spite of their differences. It's one of those types of stories. Like, once again, very simple, impossible to fumble the bag. Seems like, it's being handed to you on a silver platter. But I think the main issue with this movie is that they copy the manga directly. And in manga form, there are some things that will work there that won't work on the big screen. You have parts where there's a lot of dialogue and characters are just kind of talking to each other in the tank. And they're not saying anything crazy, like, nothing necessarily funny or super heartfelt or extremely thoughtful in the writing department. It's just kind of like normal dialogue, but you're kind of rinsing through it because you're reading it and you're going at a much faster pace than you would if they were saying it out loud in a movie. And when they say it out loud in the movie, and a lot of the movie is inhabited with those types of moments where characters are talking and what they're saying isn't funny or heartfelt or interesting, and it's just kind of like obligatory dialogue because whatever they're saying is contextually important for whatever reason, or maybe it's bullshit dialogue where it's supposed to be fun and it's supposed to be engaging, but it's just kind of they're talking for the sake of talking. And it works better in manga form, but then when you're watching it in movie form, you're like, listen, if you're going to be spending what little time you have on these characters interacting, they got to have a little bit more sauce. The script's got to have a little bit more riz. They got to be saying things that are a little bit more interesting than whatever they were saying. Like I said at the beginning, it's been a while since I've seen this. I don't remember every itty-bitty detail, but that's like the main takeaway I walked away with. This is a movie about characters in a fucking tank, driving around, and there's not a lot going on besides them talking, which is fine. But them talking is, not good. And that should honestly be the best part of the movie because it's supposed to be, a heartfelt story about these characters and their dynamics with each other. And I'm just kind of not invested in it as much as I would like to be. Actually, no, I take that back. I was invested in the characters. I did like them even by the end when it got to the climax, even though the movie had committed so many sins up until that point of just boring me to death. I was invested in how it was concluding and what was happening to the characters and the rising stakes, but Man, you have to really trudge through some boring shit to get there. And when it comes to the action in this movie, it's not very action focused, which is fine, but the few times it is doing action, it's very, very stale, and it's nothing to kind of gawk at, which is frustrating because this is Kamikaze Doga. I do not understand why they just took from the manga directly and they didn't like try to spruce it up or give it some sauce, you know? When you're doing a 3D animated movie, I want to see you fucking play around with that goddamn camera, man. I want to see you take advantage of the third dimension and that depth of field, and this movie is not doing that. A lot of people scoff at like 3D animated stuff, and the only reason you should be doing something that is 3D animated is if you have like budgetary limitations, I guess, or if you are trying to create something that will only work using that animation. Dragon Ball Super Superhero is good for its 3D fights. When you watch the fight at the end and you watch the fight in the middle, you kind of acknowledge that, okay, this movie exists in the format it exists in so that we can have these fights where the camera is like swinging around like crazy and doing all this awesome shit. But you don't really get that in this movie. You don't get winding camera motions to take advantage of Kamikaze Doga's, 3D animation. You don't get great script to take advantage of Akira Toriyama's characters or style of writing. And I don't know, you don't really got much else there. I don't have much else to say. It's just kind of a movie that feels really underwhelming given all the names attached to it. And even though it's supposed to be like a quaint little movie, it's not supposed to be like some fucking revolutionary masterpiece. It doesn't even deliver on the low standards it's kind of setting for itself. Not looking forward to the game. The game looks ass. Did anyone see that gameplay? That shit looks like garbage. If you want to experience the story of Sandland, just read the manga. You'll probably get the best experience there. I'm interested to see how people respond to this when it comes out, but not very good. Sorry. Good story, good characters, good concept, just translated to the screen a little poorly. I'm going to give this a 4 out of 10. The other movie that I saw was Deep Sea, a Chinese animated film that was in 3D and a 4K particle effect extravaganza that was on the same level as like Across the Spider-Verse. This was one of those maximalist, I can't believe that human beings made this type of movie. It was insane. It was one of like the best visual feasts I've ever been awarded. If you ever get a chance to watch this movie, if you ever have an opportunity to see it in 3D or to see it in 4K at least, you have to do one or the other, no in between. Do not watch this in 1080p. This is very similar to Across the Spider-Verse and Belle, where like the details and all these like really small, minute layers just all kind of warping into this one very elegant image. Even if it becomes a little bit too much for the eye and you kind of get exhausted or lost in the animation, it's still just insane how much effort and time went into this movie, clearly. When you watch this, you will walk away from it thinking about the animation, thinking about the visuals that you saw, more so than anything else. The story is not very impactful, in my opinion. I didn't really like the plot. It's very Spirited Away. It's just kind of this girl gets swept up into a underwater restaurant that is secluded from the rest of the world, and it's like part of this weird fantastical fantasy setting. It's basically Spirited Away with like a stand-in like Howl's Moving Castle badass type guy character that has infinite magic. It's a little bit of a combination of both of those stories, but done so poorly and like whatever the opposite of graceful is. That's kind of how I would explain like the writing in this movie. The whole movie is centered around the relationship between this little girl character and this badass magic man character. But for a lot of the movie, you don't even get to really see them talk to each other, and when they do talk to each other, they're not necessarily saying things that feel like they're growing onto each other. It's just a lot of really sappy, unearned like moments that are not built up to properly, but in a vacuum, I guess they kind of work. And because you sat there for so long waiting for something to happen, you'll just take what you can get, and you just like kind of let yourself go to these scenes and these emotions because you're watching a visual spectacle. Like, you value that in and of itself. And even though it's no fucking like Disney narrative and it's just kind of showing you cool shit and giving you these contrived emotional beats, you know, it's still something. Like, it's giving you something, even if it's not the best version of what it should be, even if it's not like a great story or a great narrative. I can't help but, you know, admire the level of effort that was put in. I can't help but admire that this feels like it's kind of game breaking when it comes to animation. And I can't help but admire some of the sappy beats that they hit and how they decide to communicate that. I really liked the ending in spite of being really disconnected from the plot basically the whole time. I thought the ending was really resonant and really powerful just because of the way it was presented and the animation and how that scene worked on its own. Some movies have scenes that really try to pull at your heartstrings and really try to elicit an emotional response from you, even if it might not have necessarily earned that response. But there's a part of my brain that still feels this level of sympathy for like any movie that's even attempting to do that, if the attempt at that in the moment is admirable enough. Like, the final scene is cool enough to where even though the build-up to said scene was bad, I'm forgiving it because it's still kind of cool. Do you understand what I'm saying? I mean, not anyone has like really seen this movie, but basically the long and short of it is that I think it's kind of boring, and I think that it was really exhausting to sit through, and it was a lot of just overly animated, over-the-top, maximalist shit getting thrown at me. As a film, it's checking off all the boxes for things that you shouldn't do, but as a revolutionary animation feat and something that feels like at times it's coming from a sincere and genuine place, I can't help but be a little bit empathetic towards it. I can't help but be a little bit generous. So with that said, even though this movie's not great, I still recommend it. If you have the opportunity to see this in 3D or in 4K, you have to. Even if this just comes out digitally, you have to. At the bare minimum, watch some scenes on YouTube in 4K if they come out like later down the line, because some of the shit in this movie is like actually game-changing. Better than Across the Spider-Verse, in my opinion, like visually. Yeah, I'm going to give this a 5 out of 10. I think that's kind of all I have to say about it. And that's it. Thank you very much for watching. There's some more movies this month that I want to talk about. Maybe I'll do it in the same format as this, where it's like a little thought ramble, or maybe they'll be a little bit more scripted. I don't have all the time in the world to make videos. I want to do big video essays, but there are some things right now that I need to focus on before I can commit to any of that. So hopefully this will be able to kind of hold people over until then, because it's still going to be a little while. But yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate you guys, and I will see you in the next one. I'll try to talk about Castlevania Nocturne next time, or a movie that came out recently. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.